Penn State is far from the only major college football program looking for a new head coach, and we're going to talk about another Power Four school that is in a similar predicament. This is Joe Smeltzer with Nittany Sports Now, joined by Kyle Fatman Golik, and this is a special interview segment of Joe and the Fatman. We'll be talking with Andy Bitter of Virginia Tech, beat writer writing for Tech Sideline, where he's been since 2022, but he's been on the Hokies beat for 14 years, which means he's covered Frank Beamer, Justin Fuente, Brent Pry, and maybe soon James Franklin. So, Andy, appreciate you joining us, and we'll just get started. Not going to bury the lead, address the elephant in the room as far as Penn State goes. I don't want to ask you to divulge anything that your readers don't already know, but from where we sit, this is recorded Monday night, November 3rd. Do you think that James Franklin will be the next head football coach at Virginia Tech?
Yeah, I think so. It sounds like it's close. Who knows if this is just agents playing games or whatever it is, but we've heard enough from enough people that are kind of high up and know this process to think that, man, it feels like they're very close to the finish line on this thing. Now, coaching searches fall apart all the time in cases, and this is still really early in the process. So, I'm trying to wrap my mind around an early November hire, because that really never happens before. But this is really a strange coaching market with so many big jobs open, and certainly Virginia Tech is making a push to get this done right now. We'll see if it happens, though.
Andy, your search is not as crazy as LSU's with the governor getting involved, but your school took it out of Whit Babcock's hands, who messed with Fuente and missed with Brent Pry here. You got yourself a little committee there with Bruce Arians and Eddie Royal, amongst others. How do you think they're approaching this with James, and what do you think may be attractive to James by dealing with them directly instead of Whit?
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. Because, you're hired as a football coach. You want to know who your boss is. Is that Whit Babcock? Does he have a long-term future here? Is there going to be somebody else hired above there? They're talking about adding a GM. What is the GM's role? Is that equal to the head coach? Is that subservient to the head coach? How's that whole thing going to work? There's been no clarification publicly, at least, about how Virginia Tech is going to approach this whole thing. So I have a lot of questions. I'm sure coaching candidates have a lot of questions about this whole thing, but Virginia Tech has made a pretty big commitment financially. The Board of Visitors approved this $230 million infusion over the next 4 years into athletics. Now they got to fundraise some of that. A lot of that is fundraising, and we'll see if they can raise that kind of money. But they're showing that they're committed in the future to play this game where money matters, and you've got to fully support these kind of programs and fully fund these programs to compete right now. And if I'm James Franklin and I see those kind of numbers, I think that's intriguing. I think Virginia Tech and Penn State are similar in that it's kind of remote schools in their parts of the state. He would be recruiting the Mid-Atlantic. I don't think you need to tell Hokies fans how effective James Franklin has been at recruiting the state of Virginia. They've watched all these top recruits go to Penn State over the years. Different brand power, perhaps. And, I don't think Virginia Tech has the recruiting ceiling that Penn State does, obviously. But he knows the area. He knows the coaches. I think he could step in and sort of hit the ground running in this. And, so that's funding. That's recruiting, an area you're familiar with. I think the big question is, James Franklin said he wants to pursue a national championship somewhere. That's something Virginia Tech's never done. He's played for one title, I should say, end of the 1999 season, and it was the perfect storm. You had a Hall of Fame head coach, you had a Hall of Fame coordinator, you had the best player in program history in Michael Vick, and you had one of the best defensive players in program history in Corey Moore. Are you going to get all those elements together at once at Virginia Tech? Do you need all those elements at once at Virginia Tech? So I think these are all the questions that need to be answered, and really only James Franklin can answer them, whether he thinks that this is a place that he can go and do some damage at.
So, from the Virginia Tech fan base, community message boards, wherever, how are people feeling about this potential hire? Are people happy to get a guy with James Franklin's resume, if that does indeed happen, or is the big game James notion, coming up short against top 10, top 5 opponents, is that getting in the way of the optimism of this potentially happening?
I think some people have brought that up. Look at Frank Beamer's resume.
Yep.
Didn't win the big one. I mean, those guys are kind of neck and neck in those records against top 5, top 10 teams, and that's those are different levels of program. Penn State's a more established program. Frank built this program up and was on the trying to the ascension, trying to get the Virginia Tech to that level. So I look at those records a little bit differently, but. If you're Virginia Tech, I think you look at the consistency of success that Franklin has had over the years, and in 8, 9, 10 wins, seems like almost every year. It's been a while since Virginia Tech has had that kind of consistency of success. They had 8 straight years of 10 wins, 10 plus wins, from 2004 to 2011. Sort of unparalleled success once they joined the ACC, and it was like you could set your clock watch to it. It was every year. 10 wins. Virginia Tech's going to get 10 wins. Well, in the 14 years since, which just so happens to coincide with the time that I've covered the program, they've had one 10-win season. I think they finished the season ranked once during that time. They just have not had this level of success. So, you sit here and go, can James Franklin win the big one? Can James Franklin win the ones that they should win? And that would be a step up from what Virginia Tech's had recently. So I think that's where a lot of Hokies fans are looking at it. They're not going, oh, he can't win the national championships. Like, okay, get us to the playoff and we'll be happy. Get us competitive in the ACC again. And I think that's a big step forward.
Yeah, he's definitely been very good at winning the so-called little ones. The end of his Penn State tenure, notwithstanding, but that overall hasn't really been a problem for James Franklin, has it?
Right. No, I mean, you win the little ones. In the last 5 years, Virginia Tech has lost to Rutgers twice, to Vanderbilt twice. No, Vanderbilt's pretty good right now. There's no shame in that. But you look at the name, they've lost to Marshall. They've lost to ODU twice. Win the little ones. That would go a long ways with this team. And then I think that's been what's holding this team back. They haven't beaten a non-conference Power 4 team since the 2017 opener against West Virginia. And that's 13, 14, 15. I forget even what the streak is at right now. I mean, that's going back to almost the start of the Justin Fuente era. It's been a long time since Virginia Tech has tasted any sort of consistent success. So you talk about Franklin, that's all he's been, is consistent success. Does he get to the very mountaintop? No, hasn't yet. But there's something to be said about raising the floor of a program considerably.
Yeah, in Penn State lore, we used to call the Virginia Tech ODU games the James Franklin Bowl because you had Pry and Ricky Ronnie going at each other. So we had it gave us something to look at. You alluded to in my previous question, in your response, about Franklin's prowess in the Mid-Atlantic recruiting wise. To me, it's one thing to sell Penn State, you alluded to that, and one thing to sell Virginia Tech. When you look at the last 12 seasons that Franklin had recruiting classes for, he averaged for Penn State 18th overall by 24/7 Sports, if you were to average it out. What sort of concerns would you have, if Penn State wasn't a consistent top 10, under Franklin? What is your aspirations with James and his recruiting ability to, get Virginia Tech to where it is?
Yeah, I think it's getting Virginia Tech competitive in some of these races. I mean, they're the top guys in the state don't even really consider Virginia Tech right now. They've had some inroads on these guys, and part of my question is, how much of that is just funding? We talk about good recruiters. Now it's like, well, what is the paycheck you have behind that? I think that's going to be more persuasive than how these guys can recruit. But, Franklin is a pretty smooth talker from what I understand, pretty effective communicator. I think he understands how to do the recruiting things that you need to do. Brent Pry was like that. He was an effective communicator, and kissing babies, shaking hands, doing all that stuff. They do the little signing day show, which I guess they stole from Penn State. A lot of things they stole from Penn State to do down here. I think that puts you in the mix. And then the question is, do you have the funding to get over the top on it? So, Virginia Tech's never been a school that's just completely out recruits its opponents. Even in the heyday of Virginia Tech, I think the highest ranked class they had was like 15th or 14th or something like that. Usually it's in the mid to high 20s, and even lately lower than that. Right now it's way down there, but they have no recruits in this class coming up. Not that I expected any when you fire the head coach 3 games in, but if you can get Virginia Tech out of the mid 40s or the 50s where it's been lately and back into the low 30s, high 20s, I think that goes a long ways. And then this is, developmental program. You get them here. That's always sort of been Virginia Tech's MO. Get them here, you'll develop them. They'll turn into something. Now, can you do that in today's modern game where as soon as a guy develops at one program, another school comes along and says, here's a big check. Would you like to play for us now? We'll see. But I think that's sort of the approach Virginia Tech still needs to take, is because I don't think they're going to go out there and just simply out-recruit. They're not going to out-recruit Miami, for instance. I doubt they'll out-recruit Florida State, Clemson. These are the teams they have to compete against, so they've got to find a different way to do it.
You mentioned Brent Pry. That's a name Penn State fans are pretty familiar with, obviously. Why don't you think the Brent Pry era worked out at Virginia Tech?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of the Peter principle, right? You rise to the level of your incompetence, and great defensive coordinator. He had those kind of skills. I just don't know if he had the head coaching skills. It was, you see the sideline stuff. It never seemed to improve over the 3+ years. The time management just didn't ever click, didn't ever make sense. And, he does, I think the areas he was strong at is, created enthusiasm around the program. He could talk. He was a fountain of enthusiasm, was always like that. From the second he got here until the very second that he got fired, building up support for the program, going out, selling this program on the road. You saw it in the recruiting show, how he would, communicate and sort of bond with players' families and stuff like that. Like, that's a skill. That's something you have to go out there, and it's genuine, and it's not something you can fake. That said, you do all this off-field stuff. You have to do the stuff on the field too. And it just never seemed to click there. They could never figure out the offensive line. They have 3 offensive line coaches in 4 years. Coordinator switch. He misfired on some coordinator hires off the bat. Chris Marv, Tyler Bowen, both first-time coordinators. They're both 32 years old when they hired. Everybody's like, why are you hiring inexperienced coordinators to go along with you, an inexperienced head coach? And then it turns out neither of them really worked out that well. And you don't come to that realization until you're 3 years in. And then you're starting over in year 4 and you get what they had this year. So there were a lot of questionable decisions he made in terms of personnel, on the field stuff. And, that's critical. I mean, you can do all the off-field stuff and be a real rah-rah guy for your program. And that was nice. That was a welcome change from Justin Fuente previously. But you've got to be able to do the on-field stuff where, I think Fuente was better at doing that, frankly.
Andy, I did a column last week rating the top 10 jobs in the country, and I gave 5 more, so essentially top 15. Virginia Tech was not in there overall. It was more in the line of if every job were to come open. But I would say this, if I were to do a top 25, maybe even a top 30, Virginia Tech would be in there. How would you assess the Virginia Tech job right now amongst the ACC and the nation?
It's interesting because one guy has won here in a big time way, and that guy was a Hall of Fame coach. He's a Hall of Fame coach for a reason, and he was a Virginia Tech guy. He knew the state. He had a way of relating to people. He had a longtime lieutenant in Bud Foster who never went anywhere else. It was sort of some rare circumstances on how Virginia Tech rose to the power that it did from the mid-'90s up until about 2011. So, I have to ask myself, is that something you can duplicate? Money has become such a big, important thing in college sports now. And for the longest time, Virginia Tech really did not spend. So is this current infusion that's coming in from the Board of Visitors going to be something that's sustainable? Is it fleeting? These are the questions that I have about that. So while it has a history of success, it has, really great facilities. I mean, obviously a passionate fan base. They're still getting 50,000 plus, even with this team that they're putting on the field right now. It's got a place that cares about football. It's got great facilities. It's, had a history where you show you could win there. There are some questions that I have long-term about how can this stack up in the foreseeable future and where college athletics is going. So, in the ACC, I put it behind, Florida State, Clemson, Virginia Tech fans will hate that I say this, Miami, just in terms of ceiling of what you can do. But after those three, I don't think there's other schools that I would put ahead of Virginia Tech, maybe even with Virginia Tech. I think Louisville has that potential. We always talk about North Carolina as a sleeping giant. I've heard that for all 20 plus years that I've lived in Virginia. It's like, well, how long is it a sleeping giant before it's just like they're asleep? They're not coming out of this slumber. They sort of seem like the same underachieving program that they've always been. So I think you could make an argument for fourth. Georgia Tech's there. They're not the most well-funded program either. They're sort of up and down. But I think there's an argument you can make for fourth within the ACC. Now, broader nationally, yeah, you're probably in that range that you talked about before, and that even might be generous when you look at some of the budgets of some of these SEC and Big Ten schools that just separate themselves. But I think the thing that changes Virginia Tech from some of those is, it has a fan base that does care, which is a lot more than a lot of schools have. I mean, you just talk about current openings right now. Would you rather get the UCLA job, which is in the Big Ten and supposedly has more Big Ten money? I don't know if they actually see that money. Or would you be at a place like Virginia Tech, which actually sells out a stadium and people are very passionate about that? I personally want to go to Virginia Tech, but that's just how I would rank them.
How are the facilities at Virginia Tech? I haven't been on campus in about 15, 20 years. So I'm taking your word for it. Like, how are the football facilities? How is Lane Stadium? How are the stuff there for the players? That's a big deal for attracting. That was something James pushed us all about.
Yeah, I mean, the stadium's very nice. Could it use a little bit more luxury seating? Sure. I think every stadium could. They have an indoor facility that's gorgeous. I mean, they built that 13, 12 years ago, something like that, tall enough to be able to punt inside, and it's not an issue. It lacks a standalone football facility in the modern sense of it. Some of these places just build one with that in mind. Virginia Tech kind of has a building that snakes around that has everything that you would want in a standalone facility. That's just not really in like one central location like that. It's a little bit different way that they do that, but I think facilities wise they're fine. Do they have waterfalls in the locker room? No. Are they good enough on the facility front? Just built a dorm for freshman athletes that are in that place as well. I think they made some serious upgrades there, and it was struggling there at the end of the Frank Beamer era. That was a real shortcoming for this program, to the point that they'd be embarrassed to bring recruits in on visits and show them the dorms or the meeting rooms. They'd be like, these things are ancient, and they look that way. It took a while. I think that happens sometimes when you have a legend who's coaching in one place. You let facilities lag a little bit because you're like, well, they're winning. Why do we need to upgrade things? Or staff salaries lag a bit because they're winning. Bud Foster's not going anywhere, so you have to pay him top dollar. No, I mean, he was undervalued with that. So I think those things lag for a while, but they've caught up on those. And I think facility-wise, it's in pretty good shape.
Is there a timetable for when this might get done? And if it is soon, how much of an advantage does that give Virginia Tech for this 2026 recruiting class, where there's a lot of guys that were committed to James and Penn State that don't really know what they're doing right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of on DEFCON 1 here, checking messages and trying to check in with people. I honestly feel it could happen. at any time. Again, this would be very early, but this is a strange situation. I think Virginia Tech is pushing very hard to get this done quickly. Does Franklin and his agent Jimmy Sexton feel the same way? Clearly, Virginia Tech is the more urgent, desperate party in this whole thing to try to get this done before some other jobs come open. Perhaps James and his agent feel a different way. There are some advantages. I think there's obviously more advantages from a high school recruiting standpoint. They moved the signing period up to the start of December. Tech does not have a big class right now, not a very good class, quite honestly. It's just a small one, not a ton of guys. They could fill that out pretty well, especially an established coach like Franklin, who is long recruiting ties and a lot of players he's close with, and could be stepping into situations where they could compete pretty quick for playing time at Virginia Tech. I think it's a little less so that, before you you'd want to make a hire as quickly as possible for the transfer portal. Well, now the window is not till January, and I'm not naive enough to think that action is not going to be happening before that. Players announcing where they're going to enter the portal eventually. But I think that's less urgent right now than maybe some of the high school recruiting that you'd like to get a jump on.
Andy, you said you've been on the beat for about 14 years. And you said you've lived in the Commonwealth of Virginia for 20 years, I believe. You at least lived there when Virginia Tech was in the heyday. We watched at Penn State as things soured with Franklin, with the big game losses and things mounted. How would you assess when Virginia Tech was at that 10-win mark? How was the fans and everything towards Beamer? Did it ever get as toxic as it did at Penn State?
Maybe not as toxic as that. I think Franklin maybe had an attitude or a persona that invited more criticism, sort of defiant at times, like, oh, you're going to criticize my offense? Well, I think I know more about offense than you did. I don't think I'm mischaracterizing his attitude on that sometimes. Frank Beamer is this, kind, avuncular figure. Like, he's everybody's grandpa when he was here at the end. I don't think anybody, was like angry at Frank. I think they were just disappointed that the program slid a bit at the pass, and they're like, we don't want it to end like this, right? And those last 4 years, they went to the 2011 ACC championship game right when I got on the beat. They lost to Clemson that year. It was a real sort of passing of the baton, it felt like. Well, Clemson really took off as a program, and Virginia Tech declined at that point. The next 4 years, they were fighting for bowl eligibility almost every single year, and the fans are just hopeful, just really wanting for that to turn around, and it just never did. It got to the point where it's like, I think it's time. Like, regrettably, I think it's time. And I think Frank saw that too. And, emotional retirement that he had, I'm sure he felt pressure from all sides to do it. And ultimately he retired for the good of the program, because he built this thing up and he felt that they weren't going to be able to get it turned. Either that through, he wasn't able to do it, or felt like recruiting had slipped enough that people were whispering about his retirement that it was affecting the program. So he really stepped aside for the good of the program. I think a lot of people respected him for that. And he stuck with the program as an ambassador after that. He's still up in the luxury boxes, watching games and stuff. He is a Hokies fan through and through. So I never think it got to the point where it did with Frank, where people just like, this is it. This is just never going to happen. And I feel like people sort of, the swords came out for Franklin as soon as the 3-game skid there with a couple of really bad losses. It was rough there for a while under Frank, but I think people are always like, come on, like, you can get this thing turned around. If the ball bounces a certain way, maybe this thing gets turned around, because they really did love Frank.
So James Franklin's had obviously 2 Division I head coaching jobs. One job he did not stay long at all. Vanderbilt only 3 seasons. Penn State, he was there for 12 seasons, and it would have been longer, obviously, if what happened didn't happen. He's young enough, I think. He's going to be 54 by the time next season starts, to where if he goes to Virginia Tech, it wouldn't necessarily have to be the final stop on his coaching run. So would there be a concern that Franklin wouldn't be in it for the long haul? Because he's mentioned wanting to win a national championship. And I don't know if Virginia Tech, honestly, is an ideal location where national championships are as likely as they would be at other places.
Yeah, I think the days of worrying about if somebody's going to be at a stop for 10 years are over.
Yep.
This is a win now situation. I might liken it a little bit to the Buzz Williams hire that Virginia Tech had here for basketball. I mean, basketball was down in a bad way at Virginia Tech. They hired Buzz, and that was a marriage of convenience. Buzz wanted out of Marquette. Virginia Tech needed a basketball program back. And guess what? They were here for 4 or 5 years. Buzz got that program rolling. They got to the NCAA tournament a couple times, 1 year to the Sweet 16. Really gave Duke all it could handle. The Zion Williamson team probably should have won that game, being quite honest. If they win that, they're advancing to the Elite Eight. That would have been quite an accomplishment at a school like Virginia Tech. But, Buzz was a short timer. He moved on to Buzz is a short timer everywhere. He moved on to Texas A&M. He's since moved on to Maryland since then. But sometimes I think you just go along for the ride, right? If Virginia Tech can get Franklin for a couple years and he returns them to 8, 9, 10 wins a year, I would consider that a success. And then if he goes on somewhere else, that's fine. Then hire the next guy. The program is in a better shape at that point. Right now, the program is 3-6. They've been under 500. I think 4 of the last 5 years. Something I'd have to look it up exactly. Where they are in the standings. I mean, it's been really rough. They've had 1 8-win season since 2019, I think. So, can you get the program back to being a consistent winner? And if Franklin can do that, and then he parlays it to success at a super big boy job where he can go win a national championship, more power to him. Then hire the next guy. There's other coaches out there that can succeed like this. But if you have a guy that can turn things around ever so briefly, I say you take it.
Andy, my final question, we're going to take you out of the state of Virginia, and we're going to go to your alma mater, Wisconsin, because
do we have to? That's brutal.
We do.
They scored a point last time out. That was an accomplishment.
That it was. McIntosh just recently gave Fickell an endorsement. This is a program that, the AD went all in for Fickell, and it just hasn't worked out. Do you back McIntosh's endorsement of Fickell? Number one. Number two, do you think Fickell can turn it around? And three, if Wisconsin does buy him out, where do you want to see your program try to go to next there? I mean, it's your alma mater.
Yeah, I don't think they should keep him. I think he's been an absolute dud as a coach. And he was billed as, oh my gosh, Wisconsin stole this guy when he was hired. I don't think anybody looked at that and thought that was a bad fit when he was going there. What he had done at Cincinnati, it's like, oh, this is another Midwest school. He'll come in, he'll modernize the Wisconsin offense. In retrospect, the whole dairy raid, air raid offense that they had, just an absolute disaster. And Buck's 30 years of convention at Wisconsin and how they found ways to succeed. And with Barry Alvarez, and I'm kind of surprised Barry Alvarez is still around. I'm kind of surprised that they allowed him to do that on his watch when he's there. So they didn't score a point against Ohio State, which is not good. There's not really a shame in that. That's the number one team in the country. That's a really strong team. I think Penn State got a taste of that last week. My bigger problem is they didn't score a point against Iowa the previous week. And not only that, they gave up 37 points to Iowa. I mean, Iowa's not exactly an offensive juggernaut. I don't need to inform your audience of that. What's going on that you lose 37-0 to Iowa? How does that happen? That's the more troubling loss to me than getting blown up by Ohio State, losing badly to Oregon. Spoiler alert, they got Washington coming up and then Indiana. I don't think they're going to win either of those games. Mm-hmm. It just seems irredeemable. I don't think they can come back from that. And if the solution is they're not going to be able to come back from that, I don't know why you're holding on to Fickell. Maybe it's the buyout, but how much is it going to cost you in the long run if this thing doesn't work out and you have to wait another year? And yeah, I would move on to him. Now, I'm an alum who's not writing a $25 million check, so that's very easy for me to sit here and say, but I've been around a lot of coaches in football, and it feels like once you're past a point of no return, I don't know you salvage or save a situation. I feel like he's past that point of no return.
But hey, remember, Wisconsin fans are spoiled rotten for complaining about it, right? To use Barry Alvarez's words.
Yeah, that was a little disconcerting to hear the former coach and AD come out and say, "Oh, you guys have never played. You don't know." It's like, what do you need to know? Do you need to score points to win at football? I don't think I'm breaking news to anybody here. I might be a lowly NCAA college football video game player, but even I know you have to score points to win a game. So don't insult my intelligence and say that, like, no, things are okay here. So I think that's the part that's a little, you know, condescending coming from somebody like that. I mean, he knows there are problems. To sit there and stick up for them, no questions asked, you have to kind of wonder what the motivation there is.
Andy, you might want to go to Will on your next employee review down there at Texas Island and say, hey, throw some money out Wisconsin way. Forget giving it to me. I want a new coach at my alma mater.
They're on their own. They can figure it out.
Oh, Andy, we appreciate you taking the time on what's been a pretty busy stretch for you with the coaching search. Andy Bitter, Tech Sideline, follow him for updates on the James Franklin situation if he is the next coach and everything else regarding Virginia Tech football. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Andy.